Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be diving in.
We're tackling a really interesting topic today, drawing straight from the materials you sent us, articles, research, all those notes.
Yep.
Our focus, Saxitoxin. It's this compound that starts out incredibly small in the ocean.
Right, with tiny marine organisms.
But it packs such a punch, it's caught the eye of, well, everyone, scientists, historians, even intelligence agencies.
Absolutely. It's a naturally occurring neurotoxin from the sea, sometimes called a silent killer.
Silent killer, okay?
And it is odorless, tasteless, super potent. Comes from these little dinoflagellates, sometimes cyanobacteria too.
But like you said, it's got this weird double life, hasn't it? The sources point to its role in, like, covert ops and historical mysteries.
That's the surprising part, yeah. Nature meets espionage, almost.
So our goal today is to sort through all this info, pull out the key stuff, and give you a real shortcut to understanding it.
Sounds good.
You know, what is saxitoxin fundamentally? How does it actually work, cause those terrifying effects?
And why does it pop up? Not just in, say, shellfish poisoning scares, but also in these darker stories. Cold War plots, assassination theories, that kind of thing.
Exactly. We've got a lot to cover: the biology, the impact, the alleged uses, and why it's so tricky to even detect.
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning. Where does it come from? The material explains it's part of this group called PSTs.
PSTs?
Paralytic shellfish toxins. They're made by specific kinds of microscopic algae, mostly these dinoflagellates like Gonialex or Alexandrium.
Ah, okay. And shellfish filter these out of the water.
Exactly. Mussels, clams, oysters, they filter feed, and the toxin builds up in their tissues. Doesn't seem to harm the shellfish themselves.
But then if something higher up eats them, like us.
That's when it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
Very dangerous.
And the danger is how it messes with our bodies at a really basic level, right? The sources mentioned sodium channels.
Yeah, the voltage-gated sodium channels, they're absolutely critical for nerve cells, muscle cells too.
Okay, voltage-gated sodium channels. Let's make that clear for everyone. These are like tiny little gates on the surface of your cells.
Perfect analogy. Yeah.
And they control the electrical signals that run everything: breathing, moving, thinking. They have to snap open and shut really precisely for nerves to fire.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And saxitoxin, it essentially acts like a cork. It plugs those specific sodium channels shut,
Plugs them.
blocks the flow of sodium ions. You need that flow to create the electrical spark, the action potential that travels down the nerve.
So the message leaves the brain, maybe, but it just hits a dead end. Can't tell the muscle what to do.
Precisely, it's like cutting the wire. The signal transmission just stops.
And the result? Paralysis.
Yeah.
That's what the sources describe so chillingly. Nerve impulses halted, motor control gone.
And it happens fast. The research you provided highlights the speed. Symptoms can show up maybe 30 minutes after eating contaminated shellfish, sometimes up to 3 hours.
What are the first signs?
Usually starts with numbness or tingling, often around the mouth and lips first.
Yeah.
Then it can spread face, neck, arms, legs.
Okay.
You might also get headache, dizziness, feel nauseous, maybe vomit. But it gets worse quickly.
Yeah, the notes really stressed how fast it impacts the big stuff.
Yes. Things like coordination go, speech becomes difficult, swallowing too, and then the really critical part, respiratory paralysis.
The breathing muscles stop working.
They stop responding to the nerve signals, and that, as the material points out, is usually what's fatal. Respiratory failure.
But there's this one detail in the sources. It's just horrifying. The victim often stays conscious.
It's possibly the worst part. The toxin can paralyze the entire body, including the muscles you need to breathe, but it doesn't necessarily affect your brain function, your awareness.
So you're aware of everything happening, aware you can't move, can't breathe.
Yes. Trapped inside, it's a kind of locked-in state.
Yeah.
Fully aware, but unable to communicate or move at all.
God, that's grim. And making it even worse, the sources all say, no antidote.
That's correct. No specific antidote exists. Treatment is all about support. Keeping the person breathing, usually with a ventilator, until their body can break down and get rid of the toxin naturally.
So you've got this substance, incredibly potent, works fast, it's odorless, tasteless.
Sneaky.
Yeah, very sneaky. And it causes this terrifying paralysis while you're still conscious. Maybe it's not so surprising it turns up in intelligence history.
Given those properties, yeah, it makes a grim kind of sense. Its potential for covert use was definitely explored.
And the documents you included show this wasn't just like theoretical brainstorming. Major powers were actually researching it during the Cold War.
Oh, yes. The material confirms both the U.S. and the Soviets looked into Saxitoxin. For the U.S., you have the Church Committee hearings in the mid-70s.
Right, those Senate investigations that blew the lid off some CIA programs? MKNAOMI, wasn't it?
Project MKNAOMIY. Yes, that was one of the programs focused on biological and chemical agents.
And that's where the heart attack gun comes in, based on the testimony in these notes.
Correct. The hearings brought out details about this weapon, a pistol, apparently, that fired a tiny, tiny dart.
Coated with Saxitoxin.
Coated with Saxitoxin. The dart was designed to be super small, barely noticeable, get through clothing, and then dissolve quickly in the body.
Leaving almost no trace.
Minimal trace, maybe a tiny red mark like a pinprick. The idea, as some analysts noted, was plausible deniability.
Right. Make the death look natural, heart attack, maybe respiratory failure, avoid suspicion.
Exactly. A natural toxin, hard to trace routinely, offered a way to mask an assassination that a complex synthetic chemical might not. Deniability was key.
Lethality plus deniability. Potent combination.
And the Soviets. The sources suggest they were interested too.
Yeah.
Based on some declassified KGB files, accounts from defectors, there are mentions of Soviet research into shellfish toxins, including Saxitoxin.
For similar purposes. Discrete removals.
Seems like it. Targeting dissidents, enemies of the state, silent weapons for silent jobs.
So we know intelligence agencies were looking into it, developing delivery systems. And we know it's hard to detect. That kind of explains why it keeps popping up in conspiracy theories, doesn't it?
It certainly fuels the speculation. In cases of sudden, unexplained deaths, especially where symptoms might vaguely resemble toxin effects, people wonder, could it have been Saxitoxin just missed in the autopsy?
That possibility, that it could go undetected.
That's why the speculation lingers in certain cases, which your sources touch upon, but we absolutely have to stress, like the material does, there's no definitive proof. No autopsy has ever confirmed Saxitoxin in these specific historical mysteries.
Okay, good point. Let's quickly look at a couple mentioned, keeping in mind this is speculation territory. Georgy Markov, 1978, London. The umbrella assassination.
Right, famously killed with a ricin pellet. But how does Saxitoxin fit?
Well, the sources say that early on, before ricin was confirmed, some toxicologists apparently wondered about Saxitoxin. Partly the symptoms, maybe. Some neurological aspects. And also because Saxitoxin would have been even harder to find back then than ricin.
Ah, okay, so initial confusion?
Yeah. Ricin was eventually confirmed with specific tests, so that's the accepted cause. But the initial ambiguity, plus knowing these toxins were being weaponized, kept Saxitoxin sort of in the background chatter.
Got it. What about J. Edgar Hoover? Died in 72, officially heart failure.
This one seems pure conspiracy theory, based on the sources.
Oh, so.
Well, theorists point to the timing the CIA was working on Saxitoxin delivery methods around then. And there were rumors Hoover was, making enemies, holding damaging files.
So they try to connect the dots.
Yeah.
Motive means opportunity.
Kind of. They suggest maybe he was silenced using something like the heart attack gun. But crucially, the material you gave us shows zero actual evidence. No toxicology, no documents, nothing linking Saxitoxin to Hoover. It's all circumstantial speculation.
Right. Important distinction. And the Russian general, Ivanov, found dead in Turkey in 2010.
Yuri Ivanov. Yeah, his body washed ashore. Reports cited in the sources mention a lack of clear signs of drowning, like struggle or trauma.
So the speculation is...
Based on that limited info, some wondered if a fast-acting paralytic, like Saxitoxin, could have been used. Incapacitate him, make it look like an accidental drowning.
But again, purely speculative based on limited public reports in the material.
Entirely. No confirmation whatsoever. Just another case where the toxin's properties make it a go-to suspect when answers are missing.
It really sounds like the difficulty in detecting it is the common thread fueling all these theories.
Absolutely. That point comes up again and again in your sources. It's not something labs routinely test for in a standard tox screen.
No, you need specific, sophisticated methods. HPLC with fluorescence, mass spectrometry, techniques not available everywhere and not always used unless there's a strong suspicion.
And even if they do test, timing matters, right?
Hugely. Saxitoxin breaks down relatively quickly in the body after death. If samples aren't collected and stored properly, very promptly.
Then trying to find it later, maybe months or years later, in preserved tissue.
Extremely difficult, maybe impossible, which leaves that door wide open for doubt and speculation in murky cases.
Makes sense. Okay, so beyond the spy stories, And the historical what-ifs, Saxitoxin is still a real threat today, just naturally occurring.
Absolutely. It's a major public health issue around the world. We still see outbreaks of paralytic shellfish poisoning, PSP.
From people eating contaminated shellfish.
Yes. Your sources mentioned a tragic case in the Philippines back in 2007, and places like Japan or Alaska issue regular warnings when conditions favor these algal blooms. Coastal communities have to be vigilant.
And on the security side, it's listed as a serious potential threat, isn't it?
It is. The CDC, the WHO, they list it as a Category A bioterror agent.
Category A, that's the highest risk category.
Yes, because it's so potent, potentially easy to get from natural sources if you know how, and could cause mass casualties if someone deliberately put it into, say, food or water supplies. The potential for misuse is taken very seriously.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've journeyed from Saxitoxin's tiny origins in marine algae,
To understanding how it jams those critical nerve channels.
causing that terrifying paralysis, often with full awareness and no antidote.
Then we saw how intelligence agencies, CIA, KGB, explored its dark potential during the Cold War, even developing weapons like that heart attack gun, according to the sources.
And we touched on the speculative theories, Markov, Hoover, Ivanov, understanding why it keeps coming up, mainly because it's so hard to detect.
Right, acknowledging those are unproven, but the detection challenge is real.
And finally, bringing it to today, the ongoing threat of PSP from natural blooms and its status on bioterrorism watch lists.
I think knowing all this is valuable because it really shows how powerful threats can just emerge from nature, sometimes more potent than anything humans engineer.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it shows that intersection of biology and, well, statecraft, how natural things can be weaponized or at least considered for it. It's a reminder that some big stories are hidden in chemistry and history.
And there's a final thought in your sources, connecting this toxin to bigger environmental changes. Warming oceans, climate shifts.
Yes, the material points out these changes seem to be making the algal blooms that produce saxitoxin more intense, more frequent, maybe happening in new places.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question, doesn't it?
It does. Something for you, the listener, to think about. If the natural conditions producing this silent killer are becoming more common due to climate change,
How might saxitoxin become a bigger problem in the future? Not just these localized shellfish scares, but maybe a wider, more frequent global concern.
could climate change end up amplifying this threat, blurring that line between just a natural hazard and something, well, potentially more dangerous that we need to be prepared for on a larger scale?